It's Monday here on the North Shore Drive podcast, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are coming off their biggest win of the year, at least in the victory margin, 32-13 over the Raiders. We talk about that win and the standing of the quarterback situation in Pittsburgh. Justin Fields quarterbacking a 30-plus point performance, but could he be benched for Russell Wilson? We'll talk about that, what sparked the run game and the defense getting back on track, all here on this Monday North Shore Drive podcast on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, joined today by Ray Fittipaldo, one of our great Steelers beat writers. And as always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as our daily content that comes out from all of our Pittsburgh sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. This show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Whether you're injured in a car accident or hurt on the job, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped injury victims for over 40 years recover more than $2 billion on their behalf. If you or a loved one have been seriously injured in an accident, call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Well, Ray, the Steelers certainly earned a lot of money in this game because they put up points. They were able to win big. And I felt like, Ray, I don't know about you, this had to be like the most comfortable feeling for you as guys writing this game. One thing people don't think about when they think about close games and how exciting they are, they're tough on the writers, man, because you got a whole story. You got to get it out by deadline. You got to get it out so the paper can put it in the right spots and everything. And you have time crunches that you have to meet. And when a last second win happens or a last second loss happens, you have to flip your entire story based on that. But this might've been the first time in a while that by like the 9-10 minute mark of the fourth quarter, you're like, I could pitch this one in. What did you think about the Steelers and winning pretty confidently in this one, Ray?
Yeah, I mean, I thought the Steelers, again, another slow start for the defense, an extended slow start for the offense, but really Mike Tomlin's formula won out in the end. He counts on his defense to step up. Those guys stepped up with 3 turnovers. I thought T.J. Watt was the reason they won this game. I mean, his first turnover set up the first touchdown, and his second turnover, denied the Raiders a chance to make it a one-score game early in the fourth quarter. So, complimentary football all around. TJ and the defense started it. Special teams contributed with a block punt, and then finally the offense took advantage of those short fields and put some points on the board.
Certainly, and I think it's very notable. The last week, the Steelers created 3 turnovers. They got 0 points off those turnovers. This week, they got 3 turnovers and they got 17 points off of them, and they won by what? 18? Was it 19 points of a win?
32-13. So yeah,
that's a 19-point win. That can be a difference maker there. But Ray, let's focus on the quarterbacks. We'll get to the run game. We'll get to the defense, all the things that happened in this game. But in this game, the Steelers did score more than 30 points for the first time this season. And there was some promise there in doing so. I think they had really 10 drives before their kneel down drive at the end of the game. 7 of them resulted in points, 3 resulted in punts. But Justin Fields goes 14 of 24 for 145 through the air, passer rating of 75.9, was fortunate to have an interception erased by a roughing the passer penalty in this game. Was this enough? Because he also ran for 11 times for 59 yards and 2 touchdowns. Did he do enough, do you think, to hold off the Russell Wilson question another week? Or do you think that his lack of passing numbers and the opportunities that he missed in distributing the ball around the field might open the door for Russell Wilson to be back against the Jets?
Yeah, Chris, it's not perfect, but I have a hard time seeing Mike Tomlin making a move at quarterback after such a convincing victory. And I know you have to separate everything. You have to, analyze Justin's performance in its own right. But he made plays in the second half. And I thought really the tipping point for me, Chris, I don't know what you think about this, but it's 7-6.
Yeah.
Late in the first half, TJ gets the turnover. They get down. It's 4th and 1. Justin Fields makes a play, runs into the end zone, touchdown.
Yeah.
In my mind, if they get stopped on 4th down there, I think it would have been very, very easy for Mike Tomlin to go to Russell Wilson at halftime and have him start the second half.
Mm-hmm.
Justin made a play, and maybe he saved his job because, the things kind of got rolling in the second half. He actually played better. But I do think it's important to point out the 2 questionable roughing the passer penalties certainly aided those drives. The passing numbers just aren't there. I mean, every single week it's more the same. I mean, other than the Indianapolis game, Chris, I mean, it's been pretty consistent around, 140, 150, 160. Those are typical Justin Fields passing days. And today, 14 completions. It wasn't until the end of the game that George Pickens had a big 31-yarder. There's just very little going on in the passing game. And I think if the Steelers really want to be true playoff contenders come December, come January, and I know there's time to work on it, they got to get better in the passing game. And to me, it's just not working right now with Justin Fields. We're going to be in week 7. He's going to be the starter again, but it just seems like they have a very clean-cut formula on how they're going to win, and I don't know if they can deviate from that if they had to when the schedule gets much tougher.
I feel you on that, Ray, because like you said, like on that 4th down play, the Steelers called play action. They called, multiple guys to get open, but the Raiders were on all of them. And honestly, even Justin Fields was kind of covered up on that play, but he's just so fast. He beat the guy who had the angle on him. And it was just like, that's how dynamic his running ability is. And I think that can't be discounted. But at the same time, to your point, how often can you win like that? The Raiders right now aren't a very good team. They have pulled off some upsets. They beat the Ravens earlier this year. But I have to look at how there were times like after the I think it was after the first fumble recovery that TJ Watt forced, and they had a short field. Oh no, it was after the blocked punt, excuse me. And Justin Fields has Pat Freiermuth wide open at the sticks, and he just completely misses him. And then another time he has guys open in the end zone, and he runs past the line of scrimmage and throws it, and it's a touchdown, but it gets wiped off the board.
The worst play might have been the lateral to Jaylen Warren that could have been a turnover.
Yeah.
There's just a bunch of bad plays, and they seem to always recover those fumbles, or they salvage field goals when should have been touchdowns. So. Yeah, I think we're of the same mind here. I think eventually we're going to see Russell Wilson, Chris, but I just don't think it's going to be this week against the Jets. At least not as a starter.
Right. And I think that's the bottom line here is that I think it's still his job because, again, when you lead a 30-point performance, it's clear he could play to the script. But I do think that the leash is a lot shorter than it was a few weeks ago when Russell Wilson was the emergency quarterback. And it might have even been this week. Like you said, if he doesn't run that touchdown in late in the first half, does Russell Wilson go in? I don't know that for certain, but I do think it's an interesting question that Mike Tomlin has to face in this game if that does happen. But hey, they're playing 2 New York teams. With Justin Fields, they're 4-2 and tied with the Ravens for the best record in the AFC North right now. And I think that is a very good place to be for the Steelers, considering all the injuries that they've been going through and the guys they've been missing. I want to talk about this run game and what opened it up because, this offense scoring 32 points, that's the difference in this not being a squeaker of a game that the Steelers had to edge their way out and this being a game that they could comfortably win. Did they find something? Did they get something to click there that'll last longer than just this game? We'll talk about that next here on the North Shore Drive podcast on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. If you're injured in an accident, you're probably wondering what's next. Well, for over 40 years, Edgar Snyder Associates have helped injury victims answer that very question. Whether it's gathering evidence, collecting medical records, or dealing with the insurance companies, Edgar Snyder Associates have helped over 75,000 people handle the what's next question. Call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. We're also brought to you by our friends at SmartSide. Here's a message from SmartSide. someone remove the smart side ad. Well, that's going to be an edit for whoever edits this. Someone took out the smart side ad. So we're just not going to do smart side today. All right. So we're just going to roll to the interlude. So yeah, whoever's editing this, just take the end of my read for Edgar Snyder and roll to the next one. Here we go. Back here in the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, let's talk about this run game and what got it going, because Justin Fields certainly got his legs going in this game, but it wasn't just him making plays with his legs this time. Najee Harris put on a performance, not the biggest performance of his career or anything like that, but I think he showed when you give him a little bit of daylight, when he's not getting hit 2-3 yards in the backfield and he can pick up steam to get to the second level, he can be a dangerous runner. He finishes this game 14 carries, 106 yards, 7.6 yards per carry, and a touchdown. Also caught 2 passes on 2 targets for 16 yards. What was your impression of Najee Harris and what got him going in this game, Ray?
Yeah, 2 things stuck out. The 37-yard run, which we don't see Najee Harris do a lot. I think that might be the longest run of his career, actually.
It's 1 yard shy of that Browns game run. At the end of his rookie season. I looked that up, but it's very close to his longest.
I knew he still is looking for his first 40-yard run. That's why I said that. To me, so that was nice to see from Najee. The big play, I think everyone who has watched this team the last couple of years kind of fancies Jaylen Warren as the home run hitter in this backfield, but Najee did it on Sunday. And then to me, Chris, the second thing, yards after contact. I mean, I know the blocking was better on Sunday, but how many of those 106 yards came after contact? I mean, it was impressive to watch. Yeah, I mean, it was probably one of Najee's better games, and no one ever questions Najee's his toughness. He shows up every game. Sometimes people, he's not the greatest athlete. He's not the fastest guy. You can question his field vision, but he shows up. And today was one of those days where the Raiders weren't finishing their tackles and Najee was finishing his runs. And, after 2, let's face it, 2 pretty bad games from him against the Colts and the Cowboys, it was nice to see him get back on track against the Raiders.
So I think it was a good sign there for him. And like you said, Jaylen Warren's kind of been that guy for a while. In this game, Jaylen Warren wasn't. 6 carries, only 7 yards in this one. He got stuffed a lot in this game. It seemed like the Raiders were kind of swarming all over his runs the way most teams have swarmed over Najee Harris's runs over the past few years. But I wonder about this, Ray. How much do you attribute to the more space to running to maybe Arthur Smith throwing a little bit more on first down than normal, or was it that the offensive line and the run blocking was just that much better?
No, I think breaking the tendencies, as we first saw last week against the Cowboys, I think that certainly helps, because you can't have 8 or 9 guys crashing into the box.
Right.
If Arthur Smith is going to be willing to throw it over the top on first down. I know we saw that at least once, maybe twice today. Arthur had some first down passes instead of runs. So I think that was a good job by him. I questioned some of the other play calls, especially when they had some short fields where they got field goals. But I really didn't have an issue, at least in the second half, with the way Arthur called the game. Now, we can get into the first halves, and it's still pretty bad, Chris, but I think he got going. The running game got going. Fields got going. It just seems like, for whatever reason, I can't put a finger on it. And I don't think Mike Tomlin can either, because if he could, he'd fix it. This team just gets better as games go on. And I guess that's good. They finish well. But, Chris, when you start playing better teams, I think these slow starts are going to come back to haunt them.
I think so too. And I think we saw that against, the Cowboys last week, and how they were able to score a few points late to get a lead, but then, one touchdown drive from the Cowboys and they lose that game. Certainly in this game, they were able to build up a lead, and then that was able to be the defining part of this game. They kind of put the Raiders back, and the Raiders kind of had to, get desperate at times, and that's where the Steelers defense, you can pin their ears back and make some plays. But yeah, I agree with you. Like, I feel like they need to start faster. I just wonder if they can find that balance that gets the run game going more naturally. And it's something you and I talked about. I talked this with Brian too. The last 2 games, the Colts and the Cowboys have just been overloading, run blitzing, said, we are not letting you run the ball with Najee Harris. And in this game, the Raiders tried to do that. They did it early. Like, there was a minus 5-yard loss on Najee Harris early in the game. But eventually the Steelers backed them off, and even without connecting a whole lot in this passing game. I think that's the crazy part of this. Like, we went over those passing numbers that Justin Fields had. They weren't impressive. They didn't, scare the daylights out of you. 14 of 24 for 145 yards, but it forced the Raiders to honor it, because they're like, hey, we can't do this. And then Calvin Austin breaks over the middle and he's got a 50-yard touchdown. And I think that allowed Najee Harris and his offensive line a little bit more room to breathe, and that created spaces for him to get to the second level. And this is all I've been saying for 3 years now. I think Najee Harris is actually a good running back. I don't think he's great. I don't think he's top 5, but I think that he can be a very dangerous runner if just giving the headspace to just get going and be able to not have to worry about defenders until he gets to that second, third yard beyond the line of scrimmage mark, where then if he makes one guy miss, he makes a big play. And heck, I don't think of all the things I've seen Najee Harris do, I've seen him leap over guys. I've seen him stiff arm guys. I've seen him bowl guys over. I don't think I've seen him put on a juke that did that to what he did to that poor defensive back who just like tripped all over himself and fell backwards. That was a crazy play.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we could still argue whether Najee Harris is a good fit for Arthur Smith's offense in the long term, but Arthur Smith has to play with Najee Harris for the rest of this season. We know that for sure. It's been a tough start for Jaylen Warren. Injuries, ineffectiveness. Until Cordero Patterson comes back, it's Najee Harris's backfield.
Yeah.
And, he owned it today. The one thing I will say, Chris, still far too many negative plays by Arthur Smith's offense.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I wonder about, I think we touched on this last week, if Russell Wilson is the quarterback, do you allow him to check out of run plays at the line of scrimmage and get into a good passing play? Because what they're doing now, when it's a run play, they could switch it, they can go to another run, but it's still, if there's 8 men in the box or 9 men in the box, it's still going to be a minimal gain or maybe even a loss still, right?
Right.
That's the one thing I don't like about this offense, whether it's the trust factor with Justin Fields or maybe just Arthur Smith being a little bit too stringent with the way he's treating his quarterbacks. I mean, this is the NFL. If you're a quarterback, you got to be able to audible to a passing play. And for whatever reason, they haven't allowed Justin Fields to do that.
They have not. And I think that's going to be a question that moving forward, how do the Steelers handle that situation as far as the freedom of their offense, adjusting their offense and calling things out in the game. We'll see how that progresses. But, hey, we've talked a lot about the offense, Ray. We got to talk about this defense because they played a heck of a performance in this game, specifically one TJ Watt. We'll get into that next here on the North Shore Drive podcast on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo, stick with us. We still got more to do here. But first, remind you, this show is also brought to you by Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. They're mesothelioma and asbestos lawyers with over 85 years of experience. Call them today for a free consultation. That's Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. We're also brought to you by Moon Township Honda. Go to Moon Honda for your next big car buy, 5802 University Boulevard, Moon Township, or at moonhonda.com. Here's a message from our friends at Moon Township Honda.
To build the Honda CR-V Hybrid, we took everything you love about the CR-V and kicked it up a notch with greater power for a CR-V unlike any before. Adventure confidently with Honda, car and driver's most awarded brand in 10 best history. The CR-V and CR-V Hybrid, part of the Honda line of rugged vehicles. Visit your local Honda dealer where new vehicles are arriving daily. Buy online or reserve from select Honda dealers.
Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, let's talk about this defense because, man, as much as we can praise the offense for putting up 32 points, this defense put the clamps on the Raiders. Now, it didn't happen right away. Of course, they gave up that opening possession touchdown, and everyone's wondering, see, I told you the defense was bad after the way that they played in the fourth quarter last week. And then they proceeded to shut the Raiders down for 8 straight drives. Following that touchdown, 3 and out, fumble recovery, turnover on downs, blocked punt, 3-and-out punt, fumble recovery, interception. That's just a complete domination of a unit they needed to dominate. They're the Steelers are supposed to play well, but you're still you know, if you're going to blame them for doing bad against bad teams, you got to give them credit for doing good against them as well.
Yeah, I mean, listen, talking to Landon Roberts after the game, and people were like, well, what happened after the first drive? He was like, hey, this is the NFL. They get paid too.
Yeah.
But after that, they made the right adjustments. Terrell Austin and Mike Tomlin did, and players like Landon Roberts, T.J. Watt, Cam Hayward, they just got after it in the second half. I thought Patrick Queen was very active, Chris, 13 total tackles. I think 7 solos, 6 assists. That's the most tackles he's had with the Steelers. Peyton Wilson, 6. And Landon Roberts, 5. You know, we could do a whole segment on TJ and what he means to this defense. But I thought overall, I think the defense was really active, really shut down that running game after the first drive. And then obviously, Chris, the turnovers really turned the tide in that game. I mean, just 2 huge plays by TJ Watt to get the Steelers going. Short field offense, scores a touchdown, and then you keep them out of the end zone, and you preserve that 15-point lead. Those are 2 of the biggest plays in the football game in my mind.
Absolutely. TJ Watt punching out 2 fumbles in this game, even though they're kind of keeping him from getting to the quarterback. I continue to be impressed by this guy, even when I know exactly who he is. What did you make from the effort that TJ Watt gave in this game, especially knowing that, hey, you don't have an edge rusher across him that many people even know exists? Yeah,
I mean, the first one, Chris, it looked like he was stumbled. It didn't even look like he saw the ball, but somehow, just by instinct, he punched it out. The guy's got great instincts. And, I mean, people talk about, Arthur Smith talks about this a lot. From his perspective, you have to stop the other team's game wrecker from wrecking the game. Right. The Raiders tried to do that, right? But TJ Watt, even though he didn't get any sacks, he still found ways to impact the football game. And that's what the great players do. So in my mind, he's on his way to his second NFL Defensive Player of the Year honors. I know Aidan Hutchinson's season is over now, Chris. He was the chief competition, right? I mean, is there anybody else who's going to challenge TJ Watt for NFL Defensive Player of the Year?
Based off of what we've seen so far, I think that he should be jumping up the boards right now.
Yeah. So, I mean, get on to hey, we're in Vegas. Get on to Caesars or BetMGM. Put that bet down on NFL DPOY. As long as he stays healthy, he's going to get the second one in the bag this year.
Yeah, I could certainly see that in this game. But he wasn't the only guy making plays. You brought up Landon Roberts. You brought up Patrick Queen. I thought this linebacker unit was flying all over the place. I thought that they were able to account for a whole lot in this game. And I was impressed by that. But I also was impressed by the coverage. And I think that there was, in most part, they were accountable. They were ready for some switch-offs. They had some moments where they give up some issues there. But I look at how the Steelers defense played as a whole, Ray, and I have a hard time complaining about too much about this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first drive, obviously, the blown coverage, I think they had like a 20-yarder to get down inside the 5. And, they obviously scored off that. But, I thought Beanie Bishop, for the most part, I know he gave up that second touchdown where he was trailing in coverage, but even Beanie made a couple of nice plays. Dante Jackson now 3 interceptions on the season. It seems like he's having a turnaround.
Could have had a 4th. He could have had a pick 6 in there too.
Yeah, I mean he's been opportunistic. Deshaun Elliott around the ball, again. So I think Elliott ended up he was 2nd or 3rd on the team in tackles again. I think so. We talk about this new secondary. Communication is an issue sometimes, but these new guys, Elliott, Jackson, they're getting after it. In the end, Chris, these guys are turning the ball over and they're making positive plays for the Steelers defense.
Back-to-back games with 3 forced turnovers from the Steelers defense. Okay, Ray. So let's say the Steelers defense is back to form and they're able to play well against the Jets and the Giants in the coming weeks here. What's the acceptable margin? Like if the Steelers hold a team to 13 points, what's the acceptable margin bringing it back to the offense where you're like, okay, the offense is doing what it's supposed to do. We won't make any big changes just yet.
Yeah. I mean, Chris, obviously 32 is an outlier. They're not going to approach that every week. Right. I think for this offense, if you can score 20, I think on most weeks, maybe give or take 1 or 2 when you're playing the Chiefs or the Ravens.
Right.
20 is probably going to be enough points to beat the likes of the Browns. And the Bengal game was on TV when I got back to my hotel here. They put up 17 points. The only points they scored in the first half were on a 47-yard Joe Burrow touchdown run. So they're struggling. I mean, it's we could talk all we want about Mike Tomlin's formula, and when you lose last week to the Cowboys the way they did, you could certainly criticize it. But he knows more teams than not in the NFL are going to find ways to screw it up.
Yep.
And he's got a system in place in Pittsburgh where, listen, you just play fundamental football. You don't screw it up. You don't give it away. You're going to win more than you lose.
Certainly think that's been the script. The Steelers followed the script, but just scored a lot more points in doing so this week. And now they are 4-2, tied with the Ravens for the best record in the AFC North. And I think it's going to be an interesting week here as the Steelers get ready for the Jets next Sunday night at Acrisure Stadium. He's Ray Fittipaldo. I'm Chris Carter. Thanks for tuning in to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. A reminder, you can get all these shows on your favorite podcasting app and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast. We'll be back here Wednesday with more on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.